Hello, I hope you've had a wonderful day of scintillating conversations, sharing of ideas, and potentially sparking of new collaborations. Right now, I am very pleased to introduce an esteemed panel. You're in for a real treat. When you think of the potential of colleges and universities in terms of the impact on local and global communities, you have no better panel than the one sitting before you tonight. I'm honored to introduce Jonathan Greenblatt, who is the moderator. He is the director of the Office of Social Innovation and Civic Participation in the Domestic Policy Council at the White House. And he also has many, many other credentials related to social innovation, but I'll actually allow him to introduce himself further in addition to the panel. But I just want to leave you with some key catchphrase to think about that will be explored further. As we think about the potential of universities, thinking about linkages with the community, the ability to have collaboration, thinking about impact, and ultimately thinking about how you align all of these different pieces of the potential into real impact on society. So it's my real honor and pleasure to introduce Jonathan. Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Well, I appreciate the very kind introduction, and I'm the one who should be really thanking you because it's a privilege for me to be here today with all of you who are going to spend the next hour with us, but particularly with this esteemed panel, which is remarkable, I think, in its diversity in many ways. We've got nonprofit, we've got government, and we've got education. And in each of these people, we have drivers of social innovation. So I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation here this evening. And I should also say, for starters, this is intended to be a conversation. No speechifying, no long soliloquies. We're going to start by asking questions amongst ourselves a little bit and then open it up to you. And my guess is that you'll have a lot of the answers as well as the questions as we sort of go through the session. So as Marina mentioned, I run the Office of Social Innovation and Civic Participation at the White House. How many of you, before you saw my name on the program, knew there was an Office of Social Innovation at the White House? A couple of you. Wow, that's not bad. This is sort of a self-selecting audience, I'll just go on the record as saying. So this is unusual, but it's a new office that many folks don't even know about. But basically, President Obama set it up shortly after taking office out of a desire to take the principles of social entrepreneurship, many of which, by the way, were really developed and defined at Ashoka, and take those ideas right into the heart of the policymaking process. And to think about how we could use strategies of social innovation to make progress on our most important priorities. So every single day we're focused on how can we better harness our human capital, how can we better facilitate financial capital, how can we use technology and data, how can we use entrepreneurship and enterprise to accelerate achievement on our most pressing priorities. And we can talk more in detail about that as the kind of session goes on. As I started saying just a moment ago, though, many of the work that we're doing in many ways, we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. I think that's true for all of us who aspire to be entrepreneurs. There are probably people in your lives, mentors, role models, parents, investors, who you've likely learned from or will as you journey down this path. And I think for me, there are a few folks who were more influential in my thinking about my work than Bill Drayton. And Bill Drayton, the founder of Ashoka, really is one of the seminal thinkers in what's still a very young field. And beyond Bill, I think, or what I would say is beyond his individual contributions, maybe the most singular thing that he's done is create an organization that's really built to last. That year on year, decade on decade, is finding and developing some of the greatest social entrepreneurs around the world, and now over the last 6 years here in America through Ashoka U. And sort of Diana Wells, as the president of that, really helps to drive and enable that process to happen. She also happens to be a Brown alum, and she did her undergraduate studies just up the road at Brown. So maybe you could tell just briefly a little bit about your journey as a social entrepreneur, how you went from the campus to where you are today.
Sure. Well, I'll start. Thank you for that kind introduction, Jonathan. And it's great to be here and see so many friends that I haven't seen in a while and don't see frequently enough out in the audience. Thanks for being here and making the trip to create with us over the next couple of days. I went to Brown because Brown was a place where I could chart a course of study that I was passionate about, and I took full advantage of the open curriculum to do that. I started taking Hindi my first week at Brown because I know I wanted to study in India in my junior year. And I ended up designing what was then a independent concentration on South Asian studies. I was a path breaker, and now there is a formal concentration in South Asian studies, I'm told. And having taken a lot of classes on history, poetry, anthropology, social sciences, some public health in there, I found my way to study in India for a junior year. I was involved in 2 organizations while I was there, and they both played different roles in forming what then led to my getting to Ashoka. One was an environmental organization that was developed to help address pollution in the river Ganges, which is a sacred river for Hindus, a pilgrimage site for Hindus, as well as it was the water source for many people who lived along the river, where we got our tea water or brushed teeth or did our laundry. And for me, as an outsider, I thought I would probably get up on a soapbox and start talking about germ theory. Well, it didn't take me too long as an 18-year-old kid to figure out that wasn't going to work in this setting. And also was humbled by the work that the organization was doing, which was actually reinterpreting Hindu mythology through cartoons, through comic book that were plastered along the walls on the river. Not a strategy I myself would have thought of. So humbling. The other work that I was doing was with a group of, in a home that was a Mother Teresa home in Varanasi, where widows had come to live out their existence. And I ended up doing a series of life histories with those women. And many of them had come from Bangladesh during the Civil War, and so my Hindi was okay, my Bangla was getting some exercise, but after a couple months, when one woman turned to her friend and said, okay, it's your turn to tell the story, I knew enough in Bangla to understand what she had said. And her friend replied, why should I tell my story to this stranger? And she replied, because if you don't tell your story, nobody's going to know about our existence and nobody's going to change it. Well, that was a heavy ball to catch as an 18-year-old kid. And so, from the other end of the spectrum, me being an outsider was an important role that I had in that engagement. When I heard a public service announcement on the radio as I was graduating from college about Ashoka that was looking for folks in India who were changing India and from India, I thought, there's the recipe. That's the perfect recipe for how to drive change. It wasn't big aid, it wasn't outsiders coming in, it was looking for the ideas in India that were going to transform India's future. And so I quit my job, my summer job in my hometown, and I borrowed a car, and I started my unpaid internship at Ashoka.
Let's hope to all of you interns out there.
Summer interns. Don't underestimate the power of your interns in Washington. They really run the place. So the rest is history. I was there for a couple of years. I stepped out to do a PhD and in social movements and came back to Ashoka.
It's interesting to hear about your journey. And it's interesting because I think that's a really nice segue to the mayor. Because as we talk about creating change and not top down but bottom up, it's interesting because I think the mayor is and you use the term path breaking, the mayor is a path breaker in so many ways, sort of as an immigrant who came to this country from the Dominican Republic, as an Echoing Green Fellow and a social entrepreneur who's now ascended to the highest office here in Providence, and as a graduate of some small parochial school up the road in Cambridge. I don't remember the name of it. Yeah. But really, it is interesting to think about and maybe to hear a little bit about your journey and the role of social entrepreneurship on your path from being sort of an activist, if you will, to now being an elected official. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me welcome everyone to Providence. I hope that you have a great visit while you're here. I want to ask you to please do me a favor and spend a lot of money while you're here. I often tell people you don't know when you're going to be back, so if you see something you like, buy it. That's true, by the way. But also, and I also let people know if you have any problems, you can tweet at me at Angel_Taveras, and we will try to make sure that your visit here is a great one. So just to let you know that's my official duty as mayor. But let me talk with you a little bit about my journey. I mean, my parents are from the Dominican Republic, and they didn't go to high school. They came here to New York City in the 60s. I was born in Brooklyn, like many, many other immigrants as well, and raised here in Providence. I'm a Head Start baby. I went from Head Start to that place that he talked about up the road in Cambridge through public schools, and I've been very fortunate along the way. When I was an undergrad, one of the things that I got involved in was community service in college. And I particularly wanted to work with inner city kids because it's where I came from. The first in my family to go to college was my sister. She's a nurse at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda. And she opened a lot of doors for me and for the rest of my family members as well. And I thought it was important to give back. I thought it was important to be involved. And so I worked at an after-school program in Roxbury, in Mission Hill, in Boston. And that really helped me. It really was rewarding to be able to give back and to also let a lot of the kids that I worked with know what the possibilities were. The first time I went to work with them, they didn't think I was with the Harvard students. They thought, it was like a surprise to them. And I'm also bilingual, so I could speak Spanish, and I like rice and beans, so that was good. And, but it was like this connection that we had from a standpoint of letting them know what is possible, and that I was very similar to them. And they say, you hear, you forget, I see, I remember, and I do, and I learn. So at least part of it they were seeing, and I know that they remember that. And I'll tell you something interesting. We started a summer program, myself and 3 other undergraduates at the time, the Mission Hill Summer Program. One of the co-founders of that program, Rich Bury, was just appointed by Mayor de Blasio as the deputy mayor for, I think it's called Innovative Projects. It's a new deputy post, but he's in charge essentially of universal pre-K and a lot of the mayor's educational initiatives in New York City. So I'm pretty excited about that with Rich. One of the other co-founders just ran for mayor of New Haven, and while he wasn't successful, he's still doing amazing work. And the other one is doing great work in terms of immigrant rights across the country. So I'm kind of the weak link of all of them as mayor of Providence. But that was important to me to have that opportunity. And Echoing Green was another opportunity for me. And I was talking to President Paxson earlier. My mom didn't want me to do Echoing Green. She was afraid. Echoing Green, for those of you who don't know about it, is a fellowship that you can get for postgraduate work. And so my mom was afraid that I would not go to law school. That somehow, if I took that year out between college and law school, that I wouldn't take that next step. And I promised her that I would, and told her it would work out okay, and it did. But she was also not used to the idea that you have a foundation that would give you money to do something like work with kids. And that's what I did in Providence, working at the Swear Center for Public Service, and working with kids in the Elmwood Community Center. And that was, over 20 years ago, 1993, during the summer. And that was important to me as well. And from the time I was in third grade, I wanted to be a lawyer because I wanted to help people. I got involved in community service because I wanted to be involved and wanted to help. I ran for mayor for the same reason, because I feel like it's our collective responsibility to improve our society. And that's what I've tried to do every step of the way, whether I was in college, law school, as mayor, and hopefully in the future I'll have an opportunity to do it on even a broader level as well. But that's kind of been my path. It's an interesting path, and I would say to you, because when you come from a background like mine, you have to explain and make sure your family understands what social entrepreneurism is, and also make sure they understand how important service is. And I'm fortunate that I've been able to live the life that I have and have had an impact in that way. And I try to bring that with me as mayor, recognizing we have tremendous talent in our city, not just with Brown, but Johnson & Wales and Providence College and Rhode Island School of Design and the University of Rhode Island. We've got tremendous talent. And how you harness that and get them involved in your community is important. And so that's always been a focus of what I do as mayor. And we feel very fortunate to have so many great young people in our city. It really gives it a special feeling to be here in Providence. So that's to give you a sense as to my path.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think a couple things really stand out to me in what you said. I mean, one of the things I think, how many of you consider yourselves social entrepreneurs today? Raise your hands. How many of you aspire to be social entrepreneurs as you develop through your careers? Raise your hands. Oh, that's less than I would have thought. How many of you just wandered into the ballroom, basically? But I think what's important is that whether you choose a path in law, or you choose a path to go launch your own startup, or you end up going to work for some large corporation, there are opportunities to be socially entrepreneurial, socially entrepreneurial, and to bring these principles of social innovation then into government. There are lots of ways that we can create change. There isn't just one path, which is a good segue, I think, to Chris. Talk a little bit about your journey from, in Chris's background as an academic and as an economist. We spent a little bit of time talking today about some of the differences that she's experienced coming from an environment like Princeton, where she was previous to her role today as president of Brown. And what's so fascinating to me about Brown, and the mayor sort of alluded to this, is Providence in this community. Brown is sort of at the center of it, yet it's one of a constellation of other entities. How do you see your role as the university evolving and growing with the community, creating social change?
Right. I want to say just, if you don't mind, a little
Sure.
bit about my path too.
Great.
You didn't ask me about it, but I'm going to tell you
Please
anyway.
do.
And, but I think it's actually a good counterpoint to what comes here, and it will get into answering your question. I'm an economist. I was one of those kids who studied about 20 different subjects before I found economics in my junior year. And I really fell in love with it because it is, very analytic and very rigorous, but it can be applied to very important social issues. So I spent my career as an academic researcher and educator studying economic development, issues of poverty, and sort of worked my way into looking at issues of health, both in the developing world but also domestically, and working with students who were passionate about translating their education into doing good in the world. I came to Providence a year and a half ago, and I spent a lot of time learning about the culture of Brown, which is very different than where I was before, and I have to say I love it. The real surprise, though, I will tell you, was I didn't really understand the great benefits of coming to a university that is literally right in the middle of a great city, and sort of historically very intertwined with that city and the state in which it's in. That was not the case at my previous institution, which was kind of disconnected in an odd way. And so it's been wonderful in a couple different ways. One is, I think there's great potential for working with students who want to do great things, who are very entrepreneurial. And the open curriculum, as Diana noted, attracts students who want to make it up themselves, do it themselves. They're very independent, they're very open-minded, and that's great. The education provides the kind of rigor and analytic framework that channels all that energy, I think, into very useful and wonderful ways. And then being involved in a city like this is great because it provides opportunities for partnership between the university and the city, between the students and people who live here. And that sort of back and forth flow of information from the students to the community and back I think, benefits both Brown University and its students, and I hope it also benefits the city and the state. We've just finished some strategic planning, and I could talk about that for a long time, and I won't. But I will say that one big part of it is engaged scholarship, and the idea that we want to take what we're doing in education, but provide students with the experiences to apply what they're learning into the broader world. And when I say the broader world, I mean Providence, Rhode Island, but cities around the country and also around the world. So we're working hard to figure out great innovative ways using new technology to open up the curriculum, provide students with just many more experiences to fulfill this desire for social entrepreneurship, which runs very strong at Brown.
That's terrific, and I think and I appreciate you sort of sharing your journey as well, because again, like through the discipline of economics, we can see that take a very data-driven approach, and I think that increasingly we're seeing, certainly from the administration's perspective, the advent and the adoption of evidence-based policies and an increasing focus on the kind of rigor, the kind of analytics that we often associate with the field of economics to this field of sort of social change, which I think is a very sort of healthy development. One of the places we see it is the data shows us that there is a relationship between the civic health of communities, how engaged they are, the percentage of the population that volunteers, the voting rates, with the economic resilience of communities. Essentially, communities with higher degrees of civic capital have a lower rates of unemployment and, again, increased economic resilience. It's pretty exciting. And it's one of the reasons why we at the White House are very focused on this work, because the President sees social innovation as a strategy to accelerate economic recovery and drive job creation. And we also know that folks who volunteer have a higher propensity of finding work. Unemployed folks who volunteer have a higher propensity of finding work than those who don't volunteer. And many of the work that I know we're doing, and I want to talk a little bit about social impact of your institutions working together in just a moment, but we know that we've focused on trying to accelerate the growth of programs like AmeriCorps, because it's economic relationship, because the demand is really high. Do we have any AmeriCorps alum in the room today? There's one very proud AmeriCorps alum, I'll tell you. Can you stand up? Tell us your name and who you serve, where you serve. What was so your AmeriCorps Vista from San Diego, and what was the organization called?
Shakti Rising. It's a women's recovery center.
Awesome. Well done. And I think there's somebody over here. What's your name? What's NCCC? Can you tell for everybody?
National Community Civilian Corps.
Great.
So we travel all around the West Coast. We work with different nonprofit and governmental organizations.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Anybody else? Somebody over here? Some shy person. Okay, over here. Can you stand up and tell us your name and where you served?
I served with Teach for America. So also
Where did you serve with TFA?
9th and 10th grade in Houston, Texas.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophie. Well, why don't we talk a little about education and the relationship, maybe, Chris, you could help us thinking about, and all of you actually, the relationship between education, educational institutions like Brown, and creating social change in communities. Can we talk a little bit about that, some of the things you're starting to see, and maybe some of the new programs you're starting to consider exploring at Brown?
Well, I mean, I'll thank you for that, and I will note a couple, and then maybe give a handoff to the mayor for something that the city is doing that I'm very excited about, that Brown is helping with. So just to give you one example, and this is something that is just being piloted this year, I'm really excited about it, and it's something called TriLab. I don't know, are there any Brown students in the room who are involved with TriLab? No, they're all off busy doing their work, I guess. So what the TRI stands for three, and the 3 parts of TriLab are research, partnership between students, between the public sector, between the not-for-profit sector, trying to make social change. So the TriLab this year is run by one of our epidemiologists who focuses on child health and development, as well as the director of Rhode Island Kids Count. And what they've done is paired up with community partners, students, faculty, and they're looking at innovative ways to improve child development in Rhode Island. And the idea is, it's a year-long seminar that involves a wide range of people, not a traditional class, because we have community partners involved. They're studying what's going on, they're studying what works, looking at data. And then the idea is that we can actually seed pilot projects to try to figure out, put some of their ideas into action going forward. So that's something I'm really excited about. The other thing I should probably let the mayor say more about, but I got a text from the mayor one night asking if Brown would help the city with a great program that they started called Providence Talks. And maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
I just gotta say, how cool is it that the mayor is texting the President Brown at night on the phone like, hey, thinking about this, what do you think? That's pretty neat.
Well, let me say that we won Bloomberg Philanthropies Mayor's Challenge here in Providence and beat out 304 other cities to win a $5 million prize from Bloomberg Philanthropies. And the project that we're working on, Providence Talks, is about closing the word gap that exists between less affluent and more affluent kids. There's been a lot of research done on it. You may have heard of the 30 million word gap. And so we have a project to close that. The process for the application was a long process, including a kind of a boot camp that they had at Bloomberg Philanthropies in New York, where they took the top 20 applicants and they gave us suggestions in terms of what we could do to strengthen our application. And one of the things we needed was an independent third-party evaluator of the program. And so when my staff came back to talk to me about that, the first thing I thought of was Brown. I said, well, this is a great opportunity for us. And when I reached out to the president, it led to a very short conversation where she said essentially yes right away, right on the spot. And I said what we were trying to do, and I thought Brown was a great partner for us. It also gave us tremendous credibility to be able to partner with Brown, and I thought it would strengthen our application. And she said absolutely, and we did that as part of the application, and in March of last year, we're selected as the grand prize winner. And what we're doing, when it works, and I believe it will work, I think can help transform education, not just in the city of Providence, but across the nation. Because if, in fact, we can help close that word gap and make sure that our kids start kindergarten ready to learn, because right now there is a gap there in terms of kids, when they start kindergarten, they're already behind. This is a way to help close it. If we can do that, I think it's going to transform the way that we educate our kids moving forward. So I'm very excited about it, and I hope that you'll have a chance to learn a lot more about it. But it's called Providence Talks, and Brown is our partner with that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I just want to note that this issue of the 30 million word gap is a really good example of like taking an evidence-based approach, identifying what works, and then being very pragmatic and finding ways to try to address it. And I'd also like to acknowledge, really, the path-breaking work of Bloomberg Philanthropies. Boy, in a very short amount of time, that outfit down in New York is doing so much good work. And one of the things we've really seen them do with great success is help advance the field of social impact bonds and pay for success, which maybe we can talk about later if we have time. I want to turn to Diana, but first I will preview that. After this, we're going to kind of move to the more interactive portion of the session. For those of you who can raise your hands, and there are some floating mics, that's great. Another option, if you have questions that you want to pose to me or to anyone on the panel, we can use Twitter to do that. So my Twitter handle, I'll tell you right now, is Jonathan_G. It's a little confusing. It's a 0 instead of an O. Jonathan_G with a 0. So if you want to, and there's some people already tweeting this panel. So if you have a question, you can't text it to me like apparently the mayor does to the president, but you can tweet it and we can try to get to you if you don't want to raise your hand or you can't get to a floating mic. So Diana, this is interesting to hear about the partnership, I think, between Brown and, I think the mayor's going to tweet a question right now. The partnership between Brown and the city. Talk a little bit, if you would, about the opportunity and the potential there for sort of universities to engage with the kind of in this process of sort of civic and social innovation, and how Ashoka U is trying to promote and support that.
Sure. So, Brown is somewhat unique, and those of you who heard Alan R. Harmon earlier today got a good taste of the sense that how Brown is connected to the history of the state, and how the Brown Charter has in it the idea of engaged scholarship and scholarship for purpose. So, any university has as a key role preparing the next generation for a future. We know that the future is different than than now, and we know that the future is a place where change is happening more quickly. We are not educators today are not preparing students to move into factories or jobs where they will be for a decade or 2 decades or three decades. That the pace of change is quickening, and we need to prepare students for today to live in that world. They need to know how to move within it. They need to know how to adapt. And Ashoka's intervention there is to support the recognition that we're preparing young people for a world of change making. And there are key sets of skills that are needed for that. Brown's open curriculum allows students to chart their own course of study. That allows that muscle flexing of being in charge of your own destiny. But even more, it allows people to find their passion and build an academic course of study around that. So you have the opportunity to drive, make change, create change, and then build a course of study around that. And by that, I don't mean necessarily how to write a business plan or how to raise money. I'm talking about pushing creativity. I'm a product of a PhD in English literature. And I tell you, those epics, they have relevance. They allow people to give themselves permission to do things that nobody else will give them permission to do. And that's a key building block in what we see as the barrier to people making change. Philosophy, sociology, economics, anthropology, all the soft social sciences are critical to what is a new field of study, social entrepreneurship. Greg Dees is the pioneer of the academic field of social entrepreneurship, and he passed away in December. But in the last year, as he was writing a book, began to write about the innovative society, that we need to create opportunities for everyone to innovate and this supportive ecosystem to drive that innovation. And that requires all fields of study. The opportunity to engage outside of the university in the community that surrounds a university is an opportunity to help make sure that students are engaging in a community that is not their home community or may not be their home community, and stretching the boundaries of what's known and applying that. When my son comes home and he's learning fractions, I can talk to him all about the theory of fractions, but when we're cutting the pizza and the half and the quarter and the third are right there in front of him, it has a different relevance. When he's learning perimeter and we're measuring the backyard for how much grass seed we need or how many bulbs we can plant, and that it has a relevance. It's not different in higher education. And the opportunity to take a question that needs an answer in society, in poverty. How do we answer poverty? Let's take some examples. Let's break it down. What are the economics? What are the psychological issues engaged on both sides? What are the power dynamics? Political theory. Social entrepreneurship, if you start with the question or the problem you want to solve, there's no better environment than a university to begin to answer that.
That's super neat. And I like the idea of these sort of epics that you studied as a PhD in English literature inspire you. I think about Beowulf as the social entrepreneur, which I think is pretty funny. So we're getting some really good questions from Twitter, so I'm going to post some of these. I will note that Ross Garlick writes, quote, "You remind me of Peter Russo from House of Cards." I'm a little perplexed that so many of you are clapping. I don't think of myself out of that way, but he writes, "Watch out for Kevin Spacey," so I'll definitely do that. And by the way, DC is just like House of Cards. It's just the same. Yeah. Dr. Pathak, I can't pronounce his name, but we got a question from one attendant asking, and I think, Chris, this is really a good one for you. What is the key mindset and skills that Brown is hoping to foster among its student body through social innovation?
Could you repeat the beginning?
Sure. What is the key mindset and the skills that Brown as an institution is trying to foster among its student body through this emphasis on social innovation?
Well, I think it's that's a big question. One thing that's very important about Brown's educational approach, and I know it's not unique to Brown, and people come from many different universities, and I know they're doing this too, but often when you look at the hardest problems, the most complex problems in society, you have to look at them from many different points of view, with many different, bring many different types of skills to bear on problems. And often those skills and points of view are not contained within one person. In fact, they rarely are. And so the idea of, we talk a lot at Brown about integrating across disciplines, and that sounds a little abstract, but I think what we're really talking about is the idea that you bring people together in collaborative environments to work together to bring their own distinctive talents to bear on really important problems. So, we encourage students to work across disciplines a lot, to think about things from multiple points of view, and to work with others. So this idea of independent thought combined with a deep sense of collaboration, those two together seem really critical for doing what we want to do.
That's great. And that kind of builds a little bit on what you were talking about, I would say, in terms of sort of studying different disciplines. Another good question's come up, and I want to direct this to the mayor. So a question was raised, let me just find it, about what are some strategies that you would recommend for, hold on a second, for communities that have a lack of capital, and how you can use social innovation and these kind of strategies in order to make progress in communities and campuses where there is a lack of funding or support. So in a city like Brown, and in a state like Rhode Island, which has the highest unemployment rate in the United States, how is social innovation a source for jobs? And what do you recommend to other communities who also might have a lack of capital, how they can use this strategy to drive progress?
Well, the first thing, I wouldn't look at it as a lack of capital. I'd look at it as using your resources and using them well. And so look at the positives that you have. And part of what we have here, I'll give you an example. Brown has several undergraduates, Sebastian Ruth being one of them, who does community music works and had this idea and is helping our community with music. And he's actually been, I think I recognize as a MacArthur Fellow, or he won a very big grant.
Something big.
Yeah, it was a very big grant. But I mean, so we have young people who are here who have an idea and make it a reality. And I think you want to take advantage of that as much as possible. Rhode Island School of Design helps us with art with our students during the summer. And so we have a lot of students from school who are part of their program there. I think you want to try to take advantage of creativity, You want to take advantage of the youth and determination to make a difference, and that's what we try to do here. And you want to collaborate as much as you can as well. And we have, I just today announced, for example, that we are using funds in the city to improve storefronts across the city. And it's not a lot of money, it's $250,000, but it is something that we can do to help local businesses beautify their business, also spend locally, help create some jobs, and get people active and hopefully promote more activity. You use the resources that you have in the very best way that you can. And also, when people have a good idea, take advantage of it. One last thing, if I could. Give you an example. We have WaterFire. How many of you have heard of WaterFire in Providence? All right, WaterFire. It's a WaterFire. We have, we set our river on fire. Not
That seems like a good idea.
Not like Cleveland. Not like Cleveland. It's a little bit more contained. But what we do is we have all these braziers on the river, and they, with a lot of wood, we set it on fire. We have full lightings throughout the summer. And this was an idea of an artist. Barnaby Evans came up with the idea about 20 years ago, and he thought it would be a one-time art installation, that he would do this, and that was it. He never thought people would come back. On a good night, we can have 100,000 people come into the city of Providence to watch WaterFire. The hotels are thrilled because they're sold out. The restaurants are happy because there's a lot of business. It has created all sorts of different activities. Now when you go, you can buy a WaterFire sweater, you can buy a WaterFire, all sorts of different things as well. And I'm sure that you will explore WaterFire on Google or other things. But that's just one idea of a concept that he came up with and has created an amazing environment, and there was just a documentary on it as well. Creativity, you have it here, and it can create commerce. So I don't look at it from what we're missing, I look at it from what we have.
That's great. So do you want to say?
Just also, not only enterprise, but even nonprofits generate economic growth. There was this great study out of Hopkins in 08, 09, 10, that the one area of the economy and job growth was in the not-for-profit sector. So, both because nonprofits employ people and are bringing capital from other parts of the economy.
So this is a really good point, just to build on what Diana's saying. One of the reasons that our office is focused on social innovation as a strategy is because we believe, as I was saying earlier, that civic health can translate into economic resilience. A core element of that are nonprofits. The president believes that nonprofits are not only the safety net, which matters so much at a time of shrinking and scarce public resources, but also they're an economic engine. Quick stats, nonprofits are the third largest employer in the country, employing 13.5 million Americans. That's 10% of the adult workforce. Nonprofits drive $1.5 trillion in revenue and contribute nearly $800 billion in economic output. That's about 5.5 points on U.S. gross domestic product. And the nearly 2 million nonprofits across the country, although many of them, most of them, don't operate at scale, they're not north of $1 million in budget, they are making payroll, they are paying rent, they are delivering products and services to people who need it. And so make no mistake, as we see and we know, because the data shows us that small business tends to drive economic recovery, nonprofits are a core element of that, making that equation work. So that's why we're very focused on that. And I would also say, in response to, again, we're getting really great questions on Twitter about the next one we'll take from the crowd, so I hope the microphone people are ready. We focus here at the White House, we focus quite a bit on the process of public engagement and work very closely with Senior Advisor Valerie Jarrett's office to make sure that we're trying to get this message out there and reach the public. And that was a question that Rebecca Townsend had asked a few minutes ago. I'd like to do a question from the crowd. If the microphone folks are out and about, does anyone have a question you'd like to kind of stand up and pose to the panel? So we may cold call you. So, oh, okay, there by the door.
I'm pretty loud, so that could work too. Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Ali Earhart. I'm from Tulane University. Looking at the topic, the university and community creating a nurturing collaborative ecosystem, I was just kind of wondering, maybe beyond like a service learning course or getting out in the community and doing some volunteer hours, what can students do to help with your initiatives behind this idea? And what can we do to serve you as university presidents in the city more than maybe what we're doing right now?
That's a great question. Mr. Mayor, do you want to, or Chris, maybe Chris, can you go first and sort of take that?
I could go first, and I would say, you're from Tulane. Scott Cowan, your president, who's just stepping down, is a master at help. It's a perfect example of a university that's very well integrated into a city, and he's a wonderful man. New president coming is great too. I like to get beyond the, I'm going off and I'm doing my service for 2 hours a week and I'm back, right? And I've done my good deed and I'm done with it. I really like the idea of students who integrate the service work that they're doing, the work in the community, in with their scholarship and in with their learning. And, you think about, we have students who are involved in environmental studies here at Brown. I'll just give you an example. And, recently I decided to support a group of them working with a faculty member to work on helping some people in the Rhode Island legislature develop some legislation around climate change. I don't know if the mayor likes it or not, but they're doing it. And, looking into doing a number of things around Rhode Island where they can really take what they're learning and those skills and put it to use. So it's more than just doing good, it's doing well using these skills, and I think that's really important. I like it when I see students who've put together almost a portfolio of this work that they develop throughout their time at Brown or in college, wherever they are, where it's some volunteer work during the year, it's courses that have a community component to them, to summer internships that get them out into different communities. One thing I always encourage students to do is if they're interested in international work, do some domestic work. If they're interested in domestic work, do some international work, because there's a lot of potential for learning and drawing lessons across those two boundaries. So that would be my answer.
Well, let me just say for the record that I don't like climate change, I will be happy to be supportive of the legislation and to stop it. But let me say with respect to the city, what can be helpful to us, and we're trying to do it now, is to address some of the biggest issues that we have. One issue that we have, for example, that we are focusing a lot on is grade level reading. We're trying to get our kids reading at grade level by 3rd grade. The reason is it's a predictor in terms of, a very good predictor as to future success. If you're not reading at grade level by 3rd grade, you're more likely to drop out of school. If you're poor and not reading at grade level, you're like 13 times, I believe, more likely to drop out of school. We want to change that. And we have about 82 3rd grade classrooms in the city of Providence. And we have thousands of students who are here. So we have a program called Providence Reads. And the focus is on working not just in 3rd grade, 2nd and 1st as well, also working during the summer and doing everything we can to strengthen the reading skills of our students. And I think that that's something that students can help us with, and the impact is significant. I also like it because there's data behind it, so we can actually show you and say, this is where we started and this is where we are. Look at the progress that we've made in that short period of time. And so that for me is something, I look at the issues that we have and try to figure out ways for us to address it. And again, looking at the resources that we have available. And we may not be able to pay everyone, but if we have volunteers or we have people who care about the issue, it can have a huge impact for us.
So there's so many great questions on Twitter, we're not going to be able to get to them all, but I'm going to try to get to a bunch of them, and we'll try to do this tight. So I'll ask you guys to give short answers, and I'll try to ask the questions quickly. Hamoon asks from the audience about applauds Ashoka for the work that you do, but asks, why does Ashoka only focus on encouraging and creating fellows for social entrepreneurship? How about social entrepreneurship, creating change inside large organizations? And it's interesting because Ted Ladd also asked the question, how do you resolve the tensions between large corporations and sort of high growth environments of social entrepreneurship? So can you talk a little bit shortly about, like, would you consider a fellowship for social entrepreneurship? And how do your social entrepreneurs manage the tensions between in large organizations or tech organizations?
So Ashoka's angle on how to foster social entrepreneurship is to work with corporations to foster companies that are change maker companies, that are companies that are, and helping companies understand that if they are doing business the way that some of the leading cutting edge business folks are doing, where everyone can be a change maker in the business, and not taken to the extreme, but but the way of doing business, the businesses that are succeeding are, not the old style of hierarchical institutions. It's where more and more people have good ideas that we can bet on.
That's great. So a question was asked by Julian Chambliss in the audience about what federal grants are available to fund social innovation. And Joshua Shoup asked, what's the White House doing to percolate innovative approaches to government, inside government? And a question was asked by Innovative Carolina about how public universities can engage state officials and how, again, more about government. So I'll just share with you a little bit of how we're trying to think about this and share a little bit of news. So we've tried to think about how can we drive incremental capital, private capital, into the social sector to support social change, and how we can better optimize scarce public dollars to drive social change. So we've tried to push with new programs to make it easier for foundations to use program-related investments. We've tried to make it easier for private actors, philanthropic or otherwise, to help fund social programs through social impact bonds. We've piloted those, and there were just announcements in New York and Massachusetts. I think social impact bonds have great potential to find new money that can be invested in creating stronger communities where you can use outcomes and you only pay for success when the goal is achieved. But I particularly want to just point out a new program that the president created called the Social Innovation Fund that we helped to lead. It's essentially a fund of funds within government that allocates money to invest and support high growth, high impact nonprofits, taking an evidence-based approach to creating change on the ground in different areas, in a range of different areas. What makes it work is that the money is competed for by intermediaries. They could be foundations, they could be nonprofits, who then have to raise money 3 to 1 for every dollar that we'll give you. So we'll give you $1, you have to go raise another 3. It's a $50 million program that within its first 3 years has deployed about $150 million in government capital. It's catalyzed an additional $470 million from great foundations. Foundations see the winners of Social Innovation Fund grants and then are often willing to step up and support because our application process is rigorous. And this year, Congress increased our number beyond what we asked for in the budget from 50 to 70 million. And it's invested in great nonprofits all over the country doing really good work. So, here's the news. On Monday, we're opening the notice of a funding opportunity, making cash available through the next round of the Social Innovation Fund. It starts Monday. There are organizations in here, maybe including Ashoka, maybe including some group at Brown, that could apply to be intermediaries. I am encouraging you all to apply. There ought to be a SIF intermediary right here in Rhode Island. There ought to be SIF intermediaries across the country. So, the word is now out. Get ready. I'll try to tweet it on Monday if you're following me to show you the link. Because this is cash you should earn, and you should then deploy into great nonprofit organizations working on the ground to create change in your communities. Okay, another question from the audience. We've probably got about 5 minutes. Oh,
If I could add on that.
Please, sorry about that.
One of the interesting things about the SIF is it's betting on the ideas that work. And it's another way that the academy and universities can play with the Social Innovation Fund, for instance.
I certainly hope that Brown will file an application.
Okay,
You're now
great.
keeping you on your toes.
Yep.
Is there another question from the audience? They want to raise your hand? Okay, over here. Raise your hand, tell us your name and where you're from. And
Hi, I'm Ivy. I'm a junior at Brown. And so this question is, oh, that's weird. This is directed at President Paxson. So you've talked a lot about how cross-disciplinary collaboration is really important and it's a part of social innovation, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more specifically, given that social innovation is not an official concentration at Brown, about the role of social innovation in a liberal arts curriculum like the one that Brown has.
Well, I mean, that's a good question. And, you know, to my mind, I think it's important to have courses available for students who are interested in social innovation to take. And, you know, the Swearer Center has been great at making sure that those programs exist. I do think that actually siloing social innovation in its own major is not really the wisest path. I think it's better to have it be something that students, no matter where their focus is, whether it's from public health through to education, through to astrophysics, should be able to access and apply to their field. So it's sort of an additive booster. That's the way I see it. You know, some of my colleagues at Brown may disagree, but I really like the idea that this is something that any student can do. The idea of engaged learning, integrative scholarship, is something we'll be pushing in the coming years. And again, we see this as something that should be kind of spread across departments, across the university. So, you know, I hope that you can tell me whether you're finding courses that you're finding valuable for what you want to do in this area. Good.
Awesome.
Good. Awesome.
Awesome,
That's
Ivy.
great. Perfect.
great. So there are some, Shahed Mulvey in the audience asked how social entrepreneurs can navigate to find the help that they need from sort of ecosystems. And Amit Dodani, where's Amit? So Amit Dodani is awesome. You are awesome. He's a high school student who wants to know what more can young people do, pre-college, I think, right, Amit? Yeah. To get involved in social entrepreneurship. I wonder, I'd open it up to the whole panel. I wonder if Diana, I might ask you to kind of lead. What do you think we can do to help get folks the resources they need and to get more young people involved in the field?
So figure out what it is you want to start and begin starting. You know, it sounds funny and it sounds, you know, but giving oneself permission to get going is the biggest barrier, and that's something we've heard over our interviews with 3,000 plus social entrepreneurs in our network, that they all started when they were young. It's another reason why university years are so critical, because there gets to be a point that if you haven't flexed that muscle, it's going to atrophy. So in terms of finding the funding, you know, at Ashoka, I have the privilege of seeing folks across the age spectrum. We have 12-year-olds who was upset that the crayons are going to waste at the restaurant when she leaves, and she's figured out how to collect the crayons from the restaurant and redistribute them in the city for schools. I mean, so just get started, and your passion and your energy and your ideas are going to be the magnet to find the solutions and the funding that you need to get going.
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing is there are best practices here. Like Greg Dees was mentioned a few minutes ago, whose extraordinary work really helped to make this whole field possible. And there's lots of other great examples that you can learn about right now. There are terrific websites, there are terrific resources. I don't think there are any barriers to this field. I think that's one of the things that makes it so exciting. You don't need a PhD, although it's nice to have one, to be a social entrepreneur. Any last question from the audience? Okay, I see two hands over here. Why don't you both stand up and ask your questions, and we'll take them one after another, and then we'll do one last question from Twitter.
Wonderful. My name is Lucy. I'm a senior at Brown. And my question is about community. So looking at the university and community, I want you guys to talk a little bit about how you're defining community. I think we've been talking about Providence and about the nation, and I'm curious, thinking about the international work that Ashoka does, how you navigate thinking about international versus domestic versus very local in creating collaborative ecosystems for social entrepreneurship.
So there's a question about community, and then over here, the other question.
Hi everybody, my name is Jenny Ansi. I'm an international student from Kyrgyzstan. Like just follow up your talk about the international work. It is not really a question, just kind of message. I want to spread it out like international students in the American community, we are not like majority, but there are still like every year 100,000 students that are coming to America. And I can't speak for all the people, but as far as me and a lot of kind of international students, we are very passionate about social entrepreneurs. Like we would like to, while being in America, can work in nonprofit or social entrepreneur agency or programs, while also bringing our own like international experiences. But upon graduation, we feel like kind of frustrated, like there's quite a limitation for us, because a lot of programs they require we have to be like American citizen or kind of specific requirement, which we found very hard to access this. So in what kind of way we said international students can play in America community?
Great question. So I'm going to ask the mayor to answer the first question about community. Then Diana, I'd like to ask you to answer the question, if you would, about international and maybe how that plays into a little bit. Ashoka, you.
Sure.
Quickly.
With respect to community, obviously from a mayor's perspective, the community is a city. And that's the way that I look at it, and how we've worked with Brown and our other universities as well, because it's my responsibility. But I would say to you, as a student, the one thing I regret as a student was that I didn't travel internationally, that I didn't study abroad, that I wasn't more involved on an international basis, because you never have a better opportunity, in my opinion, than as a student to explore the world. And when else can you leave for 6 months and basically not disrupt your life really at all, whether it be, you know, your home life, mail, whatever it might be, because once you start working, it's a lot more difficult to do that travel. So I would say that you all have the opportunity to see the world and take that opportunity. It's a great experience to have, and I've gotten a chance to see some of it as an adult, but I would have liked to have seen it as a student, and I think I maybe could have learned even more then as well. So that would be my advice.
You know, my own personal story is informed by an international experience that helped me see things from a different perspective. And so I think, you know, at Ashoka, we benefit from staff from all around the world who bring new insights and perspectives to the problems we face in entrepreneuring the organization that is Ashoka. So, you know, from where I sit as an employer, we love having international students who are not from here. And I would argue that any American organization or nonprofit would benefit from that as well. In terms of the community question, for me, and as we've seen in Ashoka's work, the solutions that come from the community in which the problem is being faced are the ones that endure and last. And it's not about spreading an organization that is necessarily going to have the same solution all over the globe, but that the solutions get adapted by the community that needs them.
That's great. So we really don't have any more time, but I'm still going to take one more question from the crowd. And again, there are so many great questions on here. I'm really sorry. One thing I would say, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think you guys have more answers than we do. So there are questions on here that I would encourage all of you to get in and answer. There should be a back and forth, not a one-way process. The last question I want to take is from Jeff Nelder. Is Jeff here? Jeff's over here. Jeff, can you ask your question from the mic, please? Because I think it's a good way to end on the theme of innovation. If someone has a mic? Let's.
Entrepreneurs today, thank you, and social entrepreneurs, I wanted to pose this question to the panel. What you think the difference is, the actualized difference, among the millennial generation and probably the generations that come up after the millennial generation, between entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs?
Let's go down the panel, yeah.
So I'll answer that briefly, and I don't know whether you'll like my answer or not. I think it's actually a great question. I don't see I think there's a blur between entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs. The students I talk to, the millennials I talk to, they all are passionate about social issues, and they tend to move seamlessly from one to the other. So I think that's a good thing. And I don't think that when we talk about entrepreneurship, when we teach entrepreneurship, we need to have a sharp divide between those two. I'd love to know if my fellow panelists agree or not.
I would say that for me, what I see is I think technology has really changed the world tremendously. And so just thinking back to when I was in school as an undergraduate, I got my first cell phone when I graduated law school. And I see children in our elementary school with smartphones now. And I think that probably has helped change entrepreneurship a little bit in the way that we communicate with each other, with the way that we're able to reach each other. And I think it's actually promoted even more creativity and the ability to communicate across the world. So I think that has probably changed. We live in a very, in some ways, a social environment in the sense of we're able to reach people across the world so much easier than we were able to do that 20 years ago. And I think that's had an impact on everything we do, from the economy to entrepreneurship to education. So I would say that might be one thing that's changed some.
I agree with Chris that there's not such a difference. I think the personal qualities of the social entrepreneur and the business entrepreneur are very similar. And, the passion, the single-minded focus, the creativity, the learning, the fail fast, learn again, pick up and do more. What I think there's some homework for you to do, Jonathan, because I think...
Did I just get a homework assignment?
Because I think, no, I'm about to give you your assignment, that there's some regulatory issues with business and with nonprofits that hold back bigger impact, and that, there are issues with that we could do. I think the entrepreneur takes the form of nonprofit or for-profit, and now they're hybrid models that could, that best suits them, but that the vehicle is not the end. And I think sometimes the vehicle drives the end, or can.
Well,
something to explore.
So I'll take your homework assignment and I'll raise you one. So I think that it's reasonable to ask me, so what can the government do to help support this and do more, so we're not locked into form? But let's make this a team project. Yes. Rather than it being my assignment, let's make this our assignment. So the first thing I'm going to encourage you to do is, guys, many of you are already tweeting. You should get on the Twitter stream now, or over the next 24 hours, 48 hours, while the conference is happening, and tell me what you would like to see us do. And I certainly cannot promise you that we'll do it, but I can promise you I'll read every single tweet, and I'll think about how we can take some of these ideas and try to get into the mix in terms of policy development. Because part of the kind of ethos of social entrepreneurship, and Jeff kind of alluded to this, it's taking ideas and from different sources and trying to build these kind of like best of breed solutions that work across sectors. So we do not have the best ideas in Washington. We don't. We are only, and the president would say it's not about building top-down programs, it's about cultivating bottom-up, solutions and strategies, working, across through communities. So let's do that. Let's take on Diana's assignment together. The other thing I just want to say before we close is I kind of disagree a bit with Chris in that I think entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship do have a really important distinction. I agree that you need to be, as Anna said, entrepreneurially minded, whatever you do. But there's Sally Osberg is a woman who runs the Skoll Foundation in California, and Roger Martin, who is on the board of the Skoll Foundation, is a terrific sort of thought leader up in Canada. And they define social entrepreneurship as the process of taking direct action, creating something new, not advocating, not lobbying, but the act of creating that better product or service, and doing so specifically for the purpose of fixing a broken equilibrium. So that doesn't mean building a hospital, although that matters. It means thinking differently about the healthcare system. So social entrepreneurship is about taking direct action to fix some societal disequilibrium, to create social change. And unlike the conventional entrepreneur, who typically is motivated by profits, and there's nothing wrong with that, nothing. Typically the social entrepreneur is motivated by the public interest. And that, I think, is a really big difference. But look, there's a lot that social entrepreneurship needs to learn from conventional entrepreneurship. There's a lot of lessons that the nonprofit sector can share with the for-profit sector and vice versa. And there's a lot of learning that still needs to happen as this field is still, I would say, in its infancy stages. So thanks for being a part of that learning process here tonight. I wish you the best luck over the next few days, and look forward to continuing the conversation with all of you on Twitter.